Hello there. Today is Sunday, the 18th of November, 2018. I'm Paul Glumaz once again with General Welfare Presents. And so the midterm elections have occurred, and the media is portraying this as a big defeat for Donald Trump, etc., 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 etc. There's an all-out expanded attacks in the media on Donald Trump. But actually, the elections were a significant victory for Donald Trump. Now, this is very important because everything in the world, as we stand right now, hinges on whether the United States is going to cooperate with China in the Belt and Road, is going to cooperate with Russia and a new global security architecture which protects every nation on the planet, and whether or not Russia, China, India, and the United States will ultimately agree to establish a new Bretton Woods fixed exchange system. So I'm going to go into the issue of the midterm elections from the standpoint of the promise that this potentially gives us in the future, and what the fundamental situation is in the future. Now, the reason this was a victory for Trump is the following. What Trump did was go out to the population and campaign, and he gathered these large crowds of people, up to 100,000 in some cases, up to 30, 40, 10, 15,000 people. He activated a whole layer of the population. Okay. Now, this whole entire layer of the population is not all Republican. There are many independents, and there are a large percentage of O-line Democrats who were part of this activation, you might say. So this put the Democratic candidates who are running to replace Republicans and other Democratic candidates who are running in close races, where they had a significant constituency of Democrats who were supporting Trump. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they would support the proverbial Republican, because the proverbial Republican did not necessarily represent Donald Trump. A lot of Republicans are against Donald Trump. So these Democrats, realizing the reality of the situation, went against impeachment. That is, in their campaign, wherever they were asked, they said, "Are you for impeachment?" They would say no. Okay. This is not something that this is something that was going on in the campaign, and it's those Democrats who indicated that they were against impeaching Donald Trump who actually won their races relative to those who were for impeaching Donald Trump. The Texas Senate race was the best example. O'Rourke, the Democrat, would have won the election against Ted Cruz and would now be going into the Senate as a Democratic senator had O'Rourke opposed impeaching Donald Trump. But a lot of his money was coming from the impeach Donald Trump crowd. You had these billionaires like Steyer from California, Bloomberg from New York City, and Soros, of course. They were pushing the impeach Donald Trump line. So those kind of candidates tended to lose. On the other hand, those Republican candidates who did not like Trump and did not want Trump coming into their vicinity, did not want to endorse Trump, who wanted to distance themselves from Trump, and those critical races, those kinds of candidates lost. Whereas those who embraced Trump won. And that's because they were able to get a portion of a larger vote. So, so coming into the post-midterm elections, there is a large potential for collaboration between the Democrats and Donald Trump. This is indicated in a lot of the things that Trump is saying about Nancy Pelosi right now. She deserves to be the Speaker of the House. If she needs extra votes to overcome a Democratic insurgency, we'll help her with those extra votes, so on and so forth. But basically, Trump is going out of his way to offer a bipartisan relationship with the Speaker of the House. Of course, there's a lot of problems with that, because even if Trump were to go with Glass-Steagall, it would not be the LaRouche kind of Glass-Steagall. It would be a green Glass-Steagall. It would be for green projects and stuff like that. But beyond that, the point is that bipartisan potential exists for when the crisis comes, and the crisis is coming. And the crisis that I'm talking about is the financial crisis. This has been coming for a very long period of time. Everyone says, you keep saying that for 30, 40 years. You know, when is it going to happen? It hasn't happened yet. Well, when it does happen, you better be prepared with policies to deal with it. So this puts Trump in a stronger position with respect to being able to deal with a financial collapse by having a potential bipartisan relationship with the Speaker of the House and the Democrats in the Congress. And that's a strengthening of Donald Trump's position. But just as significant, if not more significant, the strengthening of that position of Donald Trump is very important in the international arena, because this allows him to have more capacity to discuss, dialogue, negotiate with individuals like Putin and the president of China, Xi Jinping, Abe of Japan, Modi of India, Erdogan of Turkey, Obrador, who's coming in next week as president of Mexico. He's in a position to actually discuss policies, discuss trade, discuss treaties, discuss all kinds of things. And this is also reinforced by the fact that the Senate is key to foreign policy. They have oversight over foreign policy, especially those kinds of things. And so it's not clear how many seats extra the Republicans are going to get, whether they're going to get one or two, I don't know. But the point is that the Republicans will control the Senate. And that is where foreign policy, treaties, trade deals, all of that is done in. Now, what Donald Trump has done with the trade war with China is he's forcing the Chinese to have to negotiate potentially a new system. The Chinese have accommodated themselves to the global system that Trump is opposing. And this forces the issue. So the coming meeting in Buenos Aires at the Group of 20 next Friday, a week from Friday, on the 30th of November, and also the meeting with Putin in Buenos Aires at the Group of 20, and the entire atmosphere of the Group of 20, where you have where you don't have Obama there, you have Trump, and Trump is open to discussing what kind of new rules or what kind of new relationships are going to be established that are going to govern the behavior of nations with respect to each other. And what Trump made that very clear in his United Nations speech a few months ago was that no more global system, no more New World Order, no more global system. Instead, all relationships would be vectored around the idea of the interest of the nation state, the interest of the nation. Make America great is also make China great, it's also make Russia great, it's also make India great, and so forth and so on. And so that reality and shock that Trump has presented a radically different orientation to the globalization, and we all have to agree to climate change, and we all have to agree to birth control, and we all have to agree to the general agreement on trade and tariffs, and we all have to agree on refugees, and we all have to get together and have a global system, blah blah blah, and one country will have to sacrifice because they're rich, and another country, so that another country's poor can do better. All that crap is garbage, and Trump is saying it's garbage. He's not having anything to do with it. So now you have a different situation. You have the United States playing a different tune altogether with Trump, and playing a tune that is in total opposition to the institutions that have governed this country, that have governed Europe. And this is causing quite something, quite a crisis. But instead of collapsing, instead of resigning, instead of having the 25th Amendment imposed upon him as a result of the all-out assault that he's been going through the last two years, he has come out of the election strengthened. So obviously there's going to be renewed attacks, but his position is stronger. But it's not just stronger in the sense of domestically, it's also stronger in the sense of internationally. He is much more credible now to other world leaders than he was a year ago or right after he was inaugurated. He wasn't very credible. Okay. So now the work can begin to discuss what's going to be done. Now, on the financial crisis, the biggest threat right now, as the International Monetary Fund is saying, is something called corporate debt. Corporations have been borrowing massive amounts of money from the central bankers, and then plowing that money, and also selling their debt to institutions, to pension funds, to etc., mutual funds, whatever. They've been selling this corporate debt. This corporate debt, 1.5 trillion of this corporate debt is going into buying back stock. The FANG group, F-A-N-G, that's Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google, alone have plowed $115 billion back into buying their own stock. But all of this debt is collateralized, that is, it is bundled together and sold like the old mortgage-backed securities. These are collateralized, and then they use derivatives to insure it. And we're back to 2008, but on a much bigger scale. The scale of corporate debt is far greater than the scale of the mortgage. But then you have all the other bubbles that go along with this. So that's one factor that's driving a crisis. Another factor that's driving the crisis is the economic financial warfare that's being directed against the Belt and Road and against the nations that would be involved in the Belt and Road. That financial warfare is in the form of two forms. One is in the form of speculative attacks on currencies, and the other in the floating exchange system that we're in, and the other is in the form of the rising interest rates in the United States, which is causing a massive capital flight. This is forcing countries to consider and to start doing what are called currency swaps. And that's what's been going on. But the currency swaps between countries, like between Japan and South Korea, Russia and China, China and Japan, India and Japan is a big one, These are where you essentially um, uh, allow for the trade to be settled in each other's currencies, but not through the dollar, not through the international dollar. However, that only works in a bilateral way. It doesn't work in a multilateral way, where you have many countries involved in a circuit of trade. And if you think about all the things that are consumed in the world, they have many different countries involved in producing the parts and being put together and so forth and so on. The division of labor required for a real for an economy that is of an industrially based economy is in the 500-600 million level. You have to have at least six. You have to have a population or regional population of at least, 5, 6, 7, 800 million people in order to have, relative self-sufficiency at this point. So it may be more than that, it may be less than that, but the whole world system is dependent on an expanding division of labor. As you get into more industrialization, more development. As Africa becomes developed, you have a greater division of labor, but you also have a greater massive productive power. So they have been attacking the currencies and the funds that have been invested in these what they call emerging markets. And China's currency has dropped from 6 to the dollar to 7 to the dollar, which is a huge drop. And this is hurting their whole Belt and Road. It's not stopping it, but it is hurting. It's an attack on it. So the tendency is to want to go off the system. And then you have Trump coming in with these tariff wars with China. So at this meeting on the 30th, they're going to have to begin discussing a new architecture, because the existing architecture doesn't work. It is based on financial speculation. Every country is vulnerable. Every country, if they don't want their currency attacked, they have to defend the currency. That ties up very important needed capital for investment in their country. And that's the way it's worked, increasingly so. That's what George Soros does. That's what he's been doing for a living. That's breaking countries through organized massive raids on the currency. So we're coming into a situation now in the meeting with Putin. We have a very severe problem in that we have been at war with Russia and China, but especially Russia. We've been at war with Russia in the Middle East, through the Middle East. We've been at war with Russia through Ukraine. We've been at war with Russia with all these NATO exercises. We've been at war with Russia with all the sanctions, etc., etc. We've been at war with Russia in the propaganda sense, right? And and you also have a leftover policy from Bush and Cheney and Obama of a prompt global strike, where the U.S. Develops by creating these ABM systems in Eastern Europe and also in Korea, etc. That that we have an ability to win a nuclear war, because you can convert your missiles of defensive missiles at the ABM system into offensive missiles by reducing the size of the warhead. So this gives you, it's like having the ability to pinpoint all the targets in Russia from on the border of Russia, which gives very little time. That's what the U.S. set up. It's called prompt global strike. And then what the Russians develop are these hypersonic weapons based on new physical principles, and have demonstrated to the U.S. that even if the U.S. were to carry out this first strike, they would not succeed. They would get wiped out, which is causing a complete collapse of the. Here's Russia spending maybe a 15th of the U.S. in military, and yet they're coming up with more advanced technologies in electronic jamming and in these hypersonic weapons, which I won't go into here. But the point is that this is causing a crisis in the U.S. military. So you have the military, then you have Trump canceling the INF treaty, and all of these things: the START treaty, the INF treaty, prompt global strike, the wars that have been going on in the Middle East and Ukraine, all of this is, and the sanctions, all of this has been driven before Trump took office and has been maintained because Trump has not had a government. He has not consolidated. All the stuff is continuing to go. All the sanctions, all of that. His coming into the White House did not stop all of that. It's continuing, and he's had to put people like Bolton into the national security. These terrible people, because there was nobody else. But now that there's a bipartisan, and you have a new interim Attorney General, Whitaker, which is being tremendously opposed. But that's, he has 210 days from his appointment before he has to leave. Or unless there's a nominee in the 210 days, in which case he waits till the nominee is approved or another nominee is approved. But none of this, all of this is where we are. And we're coming into this event in Buenos Aires on the 30th of November, and this is quite a situation. This is quite a situation that's developed. So you have the financial situation, you have the strategic security situation, and then you have the crisis of how you're going to deal with it. Now, the problem is you're not going to deal with it from the United States and then work up. You're going to deal with it through understandings and agreements and cooperation between first the United States and China, then Russia and India, and then Japan, and maybe a few other countries. And that's how you're going to deal with it at the top. And then you can deal with, as you set up the new system, then you can carry out the necessary changes internally in each country. Each country would have their own currency that would be sovereign to their country, because this is in line with the idea of the sovereignty of the nation state. And trade would occur in the following form: if a loan was given to a country to purchase some goods to develop that country, it would come in the form of dollars, yen or yuan or whatever, and it would be converted into the local currency and it would be converted into local currency. Okay, and the local currency would be used internally. So internally, the economy would be under the local currency, and then you would have this relationship where the local currency could then be you could pay back the loan in the local currency, which would then be converted into the currency of the country that made of the currency that was made the loans. So this is very different. And since there's no speculation attacking the currency because it's a fixed exchange system, then you don't have to worry about the fluctuations of the currency. So therefore, you don't have to worry about the currency being devalued or upvalued, disrupting the whole trade relationship. So you can really move fast, and you can make loans and set up trade and then pay back the loans. If you make a loan to build a nuclear power plant and you build a nuclear power plant, you've effectively extinguished the loan because you've actually created the nuclear power plant, which exists, and it backs up the debt. You've essentially, in a sense, extinguished the debt, because now you have something more valuable than the loan itself. So the debt itself. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. Now, countries like the United States, which have massive amounts of debt circulating all over the world, government debt, you do not want to collapse that debt. You do not want to not pay that debt. You want that debt to be available, to be used as part of new credit. Okay. The ability of the U.S. to create debt, the ability of Russia to create debt, China, India to create debt is very important for a new fixed exchange system. But that credit has to go into the real economy, not be siphoned off into the financial speculation. So this is where we are. This is where we're headed. And within 2 weeks, this is going to be exploding. And everything's being made to undermine Donald Trump's ability to represent the United States as a nation in these discussions.
Okay, Paul.
All right, we are gathered here across the street from the Federal Bureau of Investigation headquarters. We didn't want to get too close because they're kind of touchy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is not really federal. It's not really a bureau, and it doesn't really investigate. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is a criminal entity acting on behalf of the Saudi British interest, acting on behalf of a global financial criminal structure. It is the enforcement arm. It is the spying arm. It is the blackmailing arm. It is the frame-up arm. It is the protector of terrorism in the United States. It has protected the culprits in 9/11. It protected the Sarnoff brothers in Boston, who bombed the Boston Marathon. It is the protector of Whitey Bldg, a killer very famous in this world. The FBI is here not to protect you, but to protect the drug trade, to protect the Wall Street criminals, to protect the criminal element of our society. And if you get in the way, or you politically try to change things, or you try to stop the criminality of the financial system, you're going to hear from the FBI. So today, we are gathered here in front of FBI headquarters, across the street from FBI headquarters. The FBI is not federal. It's run by a British, Saudi, Wall Street, London financial system. It has nothing to do with the interest of the United States. The FBI, the fumbling, bumbling idiots of the FBI should be dismantled.